I am a 29-year-old woman named Shannon. I just had the joy of giving birth to my first child, and I've been a stay-at-home mom for the past 2 years. The sheer adorableness of my angelic son makes up for all of my tiredness, even with the difficulties of parenting and coping with postpartum problems. He might turn out to be a pretty young man with those large round eyes, ha. Even in the short time after his birth, I find myself bursting with pride. But in spite of my cheerful disposition, I am concerned. My mother-in-law Nancy's frequent visits are the reason for it. My husband Tom is always working, therefore my in-laws are roughly a half-hour's walk from our home, and my parents are located far away. Nancy visits me after giving baby to offer assistance. She should ideally be a godsend, yet she hardly ever helps out around the house or watches my son. She brought drama DVDs with her, so she just lies on the couch and watches them. Rather, she commands me, asking to get tissues or tea as if I'm at her disposal, even though she insisted on coming over to assist. What sort of assistance is this meant to provide? I've reached my breaking point and told her, that's enough, sending her away only to get a harsh reprimand from Tom later that night. Nancy had to have complained to him, no doubt. Tom gets very angry, even when I beg him to stop, saying that he would make our son cry. He's a boy for mama. I wish I could go back in time and make sense of why I didn't realize this before we were married. Tom treats me like a member of his cult, worshipping his mother like a goddess, and he's always bugging me to cook the same food as her or to dress the same way, saying, my mom does it like this. But I persisted and kept bringing up the matter with Tom. His attention is always fixed on the TV or his phone, making it impossible to have a meaningful conversation. If you could just help out a little even without relying on your mom, it would make a huge difference. What? I'm exhausted from working all day, plus the baby would be happier if you took care of him. Does he not give a damn about his son? And my eyes are bloodshot from lack of sleep, weariness, and stress, and I'm just as tired, if not more. I give Tom a glare. He gives me a quick, harsh glance and sets the ground rules, saying, just so you know, talking to my dad about this is off the table. He's busy too, and I won't stand for any trouble you cause. John, my father-in-law, may be working hard and getting close to retirement, but he still treats me like a daughter. It would be such a comfort if he could just speak out against Tom and Nancy. I start thinking back on my chats with Tom, but Nancy's call, with her lack of tact, brings me back to the present. Without removing her eyes off her drama, she says, Shannon, the baby's fussing. Come and soothe him now. You're interrupting a good part. I leave the laundry folding and go stand beside my son. I protrude my tongue behind Nancy's back as she's absorbed in the TV. For me, who struggles with sleep deprivation and parenthood, having do-nothing Nancy around is a big stressor. However, my son doesn't care because Tom doesn't encourage him. All my child has is me. Well, I guess I'll be heading out now, Nancy says, hurriedly getting up from the couch as 5 o'clock rolls around. She gets all dolled up before going out into the evening, using my vanity as if it were her own. She seems to take dance classes for both health and attractiveness. She had been bragging, I used to be a model, and I still have a passion for beauty, since our wedding welcome. I suppose that's why I constantly appear younger than I actually am. Nancy appears younger than her actual age, 58 years old. Still, she might as well pursue her interests while she's spending time at our house if she has the stamina to do so. My boy is sleeping peacefully in my arms as I ask him, Grandma doesn't help at all, does she? After 60 minutes, the doorbell sounds. John arrived, having become weary of my mother-in-law's habitual actions. I had disregarded Tom's advice and spoke covertly with John over the phone. Despite his hectic schedule, he claimed he found time to visit because he also wanted to meet his grandchild. John, with a softness that was quite unlike Tom, smiled and murmured, he's adorable, seeing my sleeping kid. John grumbled, looking around the dirty house, so, she didn't help with the housework at all today either and left for her so-called dance class in the evening. He appeared to have learned about the dance sessions only recently. He must have seen that she really hadn't been helping at all by the state of the messy house. I raced to say, I apologize to you. It's not your fault, but he shook his head. John was apparently concerned about Tom's lack of interest in parenting and household chores as well. My wife and sister Edna would support you, but this is unacceptable. I'll make sure she doesn't come here from tomorrow on. Additionally, it seems my son isn't much help, but if you need anything, please tell me, John said. Thank you so much. I was on the edge of tears, finally experiencing someone's kindness after a long time. About 3 months have passed since John last came to visit us. She no longer visits, all because of him. Since then, I've felt a lot lighter. My peace of mind has much changed by my mother-in-law's absence alone. My son's neck feels stronger today, and taking care of him feels a little easier than it was. Ah, it's a mess again, I sighed as I peered at Tom's partially open chamber. Socks and discarded clothes were rolled up on the ground. I tossed them in the laundry basket and made the decision to vacuum his room's floor as well. I felt strange as I tucked the cleaning supplies under the bed. Did I hit anything moving? Shifting the cleaning supplies as though to pull something nearer, a plastic folder with a bank book inside appeared. I mumbled inside, such a slob. I took the bank book off the shelf and put it on his desk. My breath caught then. Not Tom's bank book, but the one I had made for my son. It's normally kept somewhere else, so why was it in Tom's room? Only the money from his birth gifts was in my son's bank account, although it was a significant sum. John and my parents had given liberally for his future. I felt uneasy, so I peeked inside the bank book with trepidation. The entire amount was taken out. I opened Tom's bank book out of impulse. Even though I knew it was wrong, I was powerless to stop. As I was about to examine Tom's bank book, I noticed that his recent bonus had been taken out in full. When I noticed the dangerously low balance, I lost all mental track. My son's cries could be heard long away, but I was too shocked to go to him right away like I usually would. When I approached Tom after he had returned from work several hours earlier, he was first upset that I had looked through his belongings, but then he said, "I gave it to my mom." What? Why would you need to support your mom? I can't believe you'd do something like this without telling me. I demanded clarification. Tom hit the desk with his palm in anger. Mom said she was struggling financially, so I helped her out. She's had her own hardships we don't know about. It's my money anyway. If you have a problem with that, we might as well get a divorce. Our son was asleep in his crib when Tom's tantrum woke him up, and he began to wail. I quickly grabbed up my son and gave him comfort. You earned it. At least the birth gift money isn't yours. My father and your parents gave that for our son's future. Don't you feel the slightest bit sorry? And please, stop mentioning divorce so lightly. Tom, seeing our son settle in my arms, gave me a disapproving snort. Afterwards, he placed a sheet of paper on the desk. My eyes widened in horror as I heard, "It's a divorce application. Moreover, the section for the husband is already filled out. I don't really care when we divorce, but you wouldn't want to live in poverty with a newborn baby, would you?" My sentiments for my immature spouse were quickly becoming colder. Ah, so he thinks this will make me keep quiet, I realized. Actually, I was staring down at my son. Tom had never held him before. Tom smiled as if he was sure he had the upper hand, seeing that I was stunned. Tom gave me a shoulder pat and said, "That's the situation. So you'll be covering living expenses from your personal account for a while." I collapsed on the floor, exhausted, as the living room door shut. My baby was in my arms, reaching out to me with an innocent smile on his face while tears fell freely. I had already made up my mind. I caught the train the following day, leaving a note that said, "I'll submit the divorce application. I'll follow up with a claim for alimony and the misused money, along with my wedding ring." I had initially given the court the divorce paperwork that Tom had given me. Taking my young son outside was my biggest worry, but he was happily in a good mood and looked around curiously. I told myself to take extra care when it comes to my son's health. My parents' house was my destination. I didn't have a lot of luggage because I only brought what my son and I needed and a few personal possessions. My parents, who had been notified the previous evening, were quite welcoming to us. When I informed them of Tom and my mother-in-law's behavior, they became enraged and politely proposed that I assist with the family business while taking care of my son. We own an orchard in our family. Although it's a lot of effort, I have some knowledge and expertise from my childhood volunteer work. It dawned on me that might not be all that horrible. My phone rang the following day when I was finally unwinding. Identity of the caller. Revealed the identity of my mother-in-law. I reluctantly took the call. I heard a shrieking yell as soon as I put the phone to my ear. "What do you think you're doing, Shannon?" I said. "Who are you, huh?" out of irritation. Nancy was shocked by my sudden shift in perspective and was at a loss for words. She trembled at my light-hearted response. "Ah, is that you? I've already divorced your son, so I had completely forgotten about you," as if I remembered. Tom had probably sobbed to Shannon, saying, "Shannon, do you realize what you've done? How could you just do something like this?" He had probably never imagined that I would actually file for divorce. Because I was being unreasonable, I could understand why she might call in a panic. "The problem lies with your son, who gave me a filled-out divorce application as a threat without being serious. It worked out well for me, though." My comments failed to please Nancy. I wondered whether he was still with her. The thought of Tom crying and hearing our phone call made me shudder. "I'll forgive you for this. So, marry my son again. He's been crying and is still in shock." The audacity of his attempt to make things right through his mother astounded me much. Nancy choked on the phone, surprised. "Enough already. I don't need a mama's boy husband or a mother-in-law who frequents nightclubs." It's evident that she reacted to the word nightclub, therefore I'm curious how you found that out. I pulled out my phone and started talking about yesterday night's events when Tom left the living room. I told my parents that I was divorcing and going back home for a number of reasons. I also explained the issue to John, who was quite kind, and I apologized. John told me everything at that point. Nancy would often come to my house because she was going to a nightclub that closed at 6 p.m. There were a few reasons for this, but the main one was that my house was nearer the club than hers. She was also able to avoid doing household tasks at her own house by spending the day at my house. Other reasons were that it was simpler to blame my son or myself for being late home, which was handy for Nancy. She appeared to have been spending a lot of money on one of the bartenders since she was infatuated with him. Nancy could not possibly have her own money, having been a homemaker her entire life. Moreover, her medical condition prevents her from drinking alcohol. She had been taking money out of John's account to purchase beverages for them, all the while consuming soft drinks for herself. After my advice, John began to have doubts about Nancy. Nancy felt that something was wrong, therefore she kept coming up with excuses to leave our house even after she was told she was not allowed to. John was astonished to learn that she had been going to nightclubs when he followed her. It also turned out that she had been misappropriating his funds. And to think that she would even spend the money from my son and grandkids. I could have avoided this if I had known about it sooner. "I'm so sorry to you and my grandson," John said, sounding defeated during our phone conversation. He knew the circumstances on my end. When I said, "So you lied to Tom about needing money because you ran out of funds to lavish on the barman," Nancy hung up the phone. I heard Tom's voice, asking, "Mom, you're lying, right?" Tom was obviously listening in. There was a pause before Nancy burst into a rage. "The bartender's name must be John. Don't use such vulgar language. I'm just showing my affection to Jason. He's always happy to see me." I sighed at her agonizing outburst. My ire was stoked again by the idea that my son's money was being spent on my MIL's enjoyment. John and I are not going to let this go. Get ready. I hung up and switched off my phone. A few days afterwards, something took place. Tom called me again and apologized profusely for NY's actions and the financial mismanagement. His foolish attempt to heed his mother's advice, presenting a divorce application would prevent her from speaking, was evidenced by the divorce application. Tom seems to have finally awakened, despite not understanding the gravity of his acts, being duped by his mother, whom he blindly trusted, and now having to deal with a divorce. I'm truly sorry. I've transferred $20,000 to your account as a gesture of my sincerity, covering the misused funds and for the trouble caused. I hope this shows my sincerity. Let's try to be happy together as a family of 3 again. I only have you just as you only have me. This was a typical Romeo maneuver, and I had goosebumps. There is no possibility of making amends. My son is all I have. From now on, I will be requesting child support. We'll talk further about this with the relevant attorney. I was aware that John had advanced the $220,000 in this amount. It wasn't from the account Nancy had been abusing, rather, it was from another one where he had been saving for retirement. Tom would now have to put in a lot of effort to pay back his father and, while his father was watching, pay child support. Tom was crying and apologizing, thinking that I would forgive him, but it was too late. I hung up, said him farewell, and blocked his phone right away. 2 months have gone by since we concluded our talks with Tom via legal counsel. I'm currently assisting my parents with their orchard and putting my child's needs first. I've stayed in touch with John even after the divorce. He comes to see his grandchild every now and then. I found out from him that Nancy had even taken on covert loans. John ejected her with extreme cruelty, having been secretly planning his divorce. Nancy and Tom appear to be living together now that Tom has unwillingly taken her in. Tom and Nancy, who were compelled into abject poverty, are both struggling to pay off their obligations. Gazing into my son's naive eyes, I am resolute in my parenting to ensure he doesn't become like his dad or grandma.